right? I know we have all these layoffs and things like that, but you got to find a culture that's going to respect you and allow you to really say, hey, here are my boundaries. This is what I can give you. And I'm going to give you 8-10 hours most days, but there are some days that you're only going to get 4 because I've got other things going on, or I just need to take a break. I think we're in a time that we can say that. And, we're seeing it with this new generation coming into the workforce. They've got boundaries. They have a whole new way of working. Whereas, me, I entered the workforce in like the late 90s. Totally different work style, totally different expectations. And so you've also got to be in the middle and figure out like, how do we make that work? Because you have a very multi-generational workforce.
This is the Rebel HR Podcast, the podcast where we talk to HR innovators about all things people leadership. If you're looking for places to find about new ways to think about the world of work, this is the podcast for you. Please subscribe from your favorite podcast listening platform today and leave us a review. Rebel on, HR Rebels. Welcome back, Rebel HR listeners. We are going to have a fun conversation this week. With us, we have Betsy Kauffman. She is a renowned professional coach and TED Talk speaker who we are going to be talking all about a membership program providing personal and professional development, empowering mid-level female leaders. We had a wonderful pre-discussion, so I can't wait to have this discussion now that we've hit record. With us, we also have our wonderful co-host, Molly, who's going to be asking all of the good questions today. So welcome to the show, Betsy.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to see where this goes and unpack all kinds of goodness.
I'm always excited to see where this goes too. So who knows? When we hit record, we just never know. But we're going to have fun. We're going to have fun today.
Okay.
So I want to start off with the first question, and that is, what prompted you to launch a membership program dedicated to developing and empowering mid-level female professionals?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was doing some branding work with a really phenomenal woman whose name is Tiffany Newman. And it wasn't just like your typical, like, what's your brand? Who are you? Like very markety, surfacey, but it was actually some deep, like psychological, like work. So it was almost like we had like a session or several sessions. And part of the work was, go out to your clients, go out to your customers, go out to your team, and really have them lean into like what you do and what are you good at. And what came back was really shocking to me was like, you actually are really good at working with mid-level leaders, and majority of the folks that you love to work with are women. And it just became this thing to say, okay, why, like, let's create something around that, because the work that I do in my organizational design work and in my consulting, most of those folks happen to be women. I work with men, don't get me wrong. And I actually have a house full of men. So it's not that I have it. Like, I love men. We'll leave it at that. But I found that women, especially in that mid-level, needed support. They weren't getting the support they needed. And they were, I would have lots and lots of one-on-one conversations, both personally and professionally. So we created the collaborative, and it's about the personal and professional development of mid-level female leaders. That's a very long explanation.
Maybe you're just around too many men that you just want to work around women. That might
I needed to balance out.
Yeah, you needed a break.
In my home. I had to figure something out. How do I do that?
So I want to talk about that a little bit. It's so there's a lot of statistics out there that are concerning around the number of women in managerial roles, certainly in senior managerial roles. As you've been doing this work, what are some of those statistics or data points that you're trying to impact through your collaborative?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big topic is burnout, right? And we're seeing a huge exit from women, especially senior level, mid-level women, because they're just burned out. They're tired. When the pandemic hit, we're almost literally 3 years from when they shut the world down, like mid-March. School had to still happen. All the house stuff sort of happened. Work had to happen. There's no beginning or end to our days. And so women were just feeling a lot of that pressure. They take on a lot of things, both personally and at home as well as at work. And so we're just seeing that we have this exit, and we have people just like, absolutely, these women are just exhausted. And they're trying to figure out how to balance everything and be perfect, right? Because there's like this connotation that we have to be like women of the 50s, where we take care of our kids and we cook and we clean and we do all these good things, as well as be women of 2023, and high powered and really working and very much, living into that image as well. And so I think there's this unrealistic view of what is expected of women. And we put a lot of it on ourselves. So that's the other thing is we hold a lot of it ourselves as women. And I don't think anybody else is holding that same perception.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. A lot of it comes from our own expectations of ourselves, as well as, outside pressures. But I guess my question is specifically within us in HR and just leaders of these females, how can we support them? And how can we help lead them forward?
Yeah. I think there's lots of different options for that, right? Some of it is allowing them, creating somewhat of their own schedule, right? So I know we always talk like, we're now in this situation, we're trying to figure out this whole remote and office and where do we work, but where do I need to be? Give me some guidelines, core working hours. We need to be, working with us, let's say 10 to 3 or whatever that means. But outside of that, you can, you're an adult. Let's figure out how to manage the workday and how to do your work, especially, the majority of us are professionals, right? And so giving that flexibility, but then also, modeling, right? One thing to say like, okay, take a vacation. And then if your leader actually worked on vacation, that's not the embodiment that we're looking for, right? So as HR leaders, how do we help leaders within the company to say, okay, here's our values. Here's how we're going to live. Here's the expectation that we have. And if you're not living into those, let's talk about that. What do we want to do about this? So if you're on vacation and you're sending your team things, you've now created a culture that's like an expectation of that person to work as well on vacation. So it's really about, let's set those boundaries and guidelines, but then let's support us to live into them as opposed to like, yeah. I don't need you on vacation. That's okay. Oh, just kidding. Come back. Come get on this call. Those types of things. Question.
I'm definitely guilty of that.
Yeah, I've been trying to work really hard on that as well.
I am too. We all are. We're all guilty of it because like things pop up and we want to, but it's like, can you really shut it off? And sometimes we just can't, just depending on the role that we're in. But we've got to create those boundaries to allow folks to feel like I can shut it off. I can turn, like when I got on this podcast, everything went to airplane mode, right? It's actually kind of refreshing because I'm just going to focus on you all. But like when you go on vacation, do you do that? Do you like take the emails off your phone and the Slacks and the Teams chats and all the ways that people can connect with you? Probably not, because we feel, it's a lot to feel disconnected. So
I think it's a really great example. It's that, that modeling of healthy boundaries and focusing on the things that are valuable. I guess one of my questions there is, I think that the value sets of some senior leaders don't necessarily align with a lot of middle managers' value sets. And that's kind of a point of internal conflict that I've had as my career has progressed. It's, the expectations become that work is your first priority, period. And the rest of it falls to the wayside, at least in many cultures at an organization. And so I'm curious how you've seen those value sets become aligned at organizations and what are companies doing to reinforce that for the women within their organization and men who are looking for more balance and fulfillment within work and outside work.
Yeah. I think, it's having the conversations and being transparent, right? Here are my values. This is what I have going on in my life. Some people don't want to talk about their personal life, but I think as a leader, it is good to know, like, okay, what do you have going on so I can be aware? And it's not so much that, it's so I can use it against you, but it's like, so I can be aware so that I can help support you within your role. And I think that's the first thing. And there's this, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I'm going to age myself. We were very separate, personal, professional, right? We kept them extremely separate. And even like social media was like created that way. Like Facebook was for personal, LinkedIn was for professional, and never shall the two meet, right? And then I think the pandemic took that and like snow globed it because it's now all married together. And I feel like as, employees and employers, we are now more comfortable. Like this is my whole authentic self and bringing it to the table. So I do think we should, as HR leaders, how do we bring our whole authentic self to the table? and make it known. And then allow that to help support each person what they need individually. And it's just this it's an interesting dynamic because there are folks that just aren't comfortable with that. The other thing is, and we talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but if your employees are not fulfilled outside of work, no amount of employee engagement or surveys or perks are going to actually help them, right, to love their work. So part of it could be like, how do we support them in feeling fulfilled personally so that they can actually feel fulfilled professionally as well? So that's some work that I've been doing with my team on this collaborative, because there's all the studies around it. We throw so much money at employee engagement and employee surveys and how do we keep people loving what they do? Well, if they're not happy outside of work, it doesn't matter. They're going to bring that with them because we bring our whole selves to work. So there could be some additional programs that you offer that are outside of the company to help them fulfill themselves, and come to work present and whole and ready to do the work.
We'll be back after a quick break.
And so used to having everything in front of them right away that we forget that innovation just takes time. I myself, I get frustrated too. Why? And this as being one of my best friends is, hey, I talk to you all the time. Hey, man, I'm frustrated in the fact that I can't seem to just get there in the next day. But that's just not how these things work, right? Innovation needs to be planned out. It needs to be very methodical. And then when it finally hits, that's when it seems like to everyone else that it sort of just came out of nowhere. But to you, the amount of dedication that it took over that time.
So wait a minute. You're saying my employee engagement initiatives don't work?
Probably not as much usually. Yeah, call me radical at this point, but they're good. And you make it a little bump or a blip, right? But like the ping pong tables and the popsicles are all great. They're feeding that little bit of that neuron that's like the dopamine, like it spikes. Yay, I get to play ping pong, or I get to go, if I even go to the office. But really it's, how do we make sure that they're supported outside of work first before they bring it to work?
I see that a lot, specifically within women. But when they're more confident and, have more energy outside of work, that often comes to work. And that's really when they can make an impact. I'm like, what's going on with you? And, usually it does stem from something on their personal life. If things are going really well for them. But confidence, I think, is one thing that's really something that female leaders, I think, we can all work on a little bit, right? It takes us a little bit of time to get there. Do you see that?
I do. I was just, the business journals that are in all these big different cities. So I live in Charlotte. So I was at the Charlotte Business Journal mentoring program, as one of the mentors. And it was like, 25 mentors and like 150 women. It was crazy. And a lot of the themes of the sessions that I was doing with the women that approached me were about confidence. We're about having a voice. We're about creating boundaries, right? So, for example, with this program that we do with the collaborative, all of our programming is during the work week, right? Because we are trying to be very cautious of like not stepping into their weekends, because I know we all know how valuable time is outside of work. But we find sometimes that these women have to prioritize the program, the professional development collaborative program, to like a meeting that their boss has held. Well, as a leader, you actually create your own boundaries, and it's a mindset shift that you have to bring to the table to say, okay, no, I can't meet with you because I have this professional development program that you're sponsoring or that I'm paying for myself. Can I meet with you at this time or this time? Right. And I think sometimes female leaders will not actually create their boundaries, and they'll kind of do what is asked of them as opposed to say like, can you get on that meeting at 5:30? No, I can't. I'm done. I need to go get my child from daycare, or I need to take my child to a sports activity. And it's the same thing for men, right? So I think men are a little bit more like, no, I can't do it. Or they have somebody that will help them or support them. Where women will be like, okay, I need some support. Like, I'm going to take it on because it's just what I have to do. So it's creating those boundaries, and you really do own, as a leader, you own your time. And you need to you can manage your time. And I think that's a shift that sometimes, especially females, don't leverage. And that comes with confidence. And that comes with, being able to push back and being able to set those boundaries. Whole new topic we could just like that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. Well, we said there's probably gonna be like 4 different podcast episodes that shoot off of this because it's such a broad and critical topic. But
Right.
here's a great example of that. A story popped into my head when you were describing that scenario, and I think before the pandemic, we were apprehensive to share too much about what we were doing, especially if that schedule that we were in, and it was personal and it impacted work, was during work hours, right? So we were on a call the other day, and a female on the call wasn't on camera, and she was like, I'll be here and there, but I have to run my kid to hockey practice.
Yeah.
Right. And 3 years ago, that never would have happened. Right.
Right.
Well, it just so happens that one of the senior managers on the call is a huge hockey fan, and kids, and instead of it turning into like, oh, you're not committed to the company, because it turned into a really cool conversation about kids' activities, hockey, how we all balance that. And it really humanized everybody on that call to each other. And it was a really great opportunity for us to really connect and reflect on the world that we all live in. And it was all managers on this call.
Yeah.
But I think that's, it's those interactions for me that, those matter more than, the employee engagement, pizza parties.
It's
right?
it is. It's well, at this point, it is about connection, right? And it is about collaboration, and it is about supporting and empathizing with each person, what they're going through. And like, the funny thing is, we have all these calls, and most organizations, like, there's just a lot going on. And so like, oh no, I'm going to miss a call. Guess what? 99% of the time, we're going to rehash it again. Even if you miss the call, you're going to have another call probably tomorrow and then the next day. So it's okay to miss the call. And I think, we sometimes get so wrapped up in it. Like, this is a really important call. Guess what? We don't move that fast. Most organizations aren't moving that fast. That whatever happens in this 1 hour of a session is going to completely determine the fate of you and your life and your world, right? We're going to continue to rehash it and keep working through it. So I think that's the other thing, is like just being okay. Like, yep, you know what? You guys got this. I'm going to step out. I got to go take my kid to hockey practice or whatever. I will come back to you, or come back to me, and we'll pick it up again tomorrow, or whatever makes sense. Or, whatever, just figure out the way to get back to me. So, I mean, we're not moving at the speed of light in majority of organizations. So that's probably a whole nother topic, but like, you guys are, I think most folks can put that, you're probably right. We're not moving that fast, because there's just so much complexities that we're working through in an organization.
We should never be going so fast that people burn out.
Right.
There's a difference between, an appropriate level of stress, because you need some stress to get some things done.
Yeah.
But when people are burning out time and time again, then there's a systemic issue, right? I mean, that's. And that's, I think that's HR's role to catch that stuff, right?
We're FOMO piece. Like, oh gosh, I'm going to miss this important meeting. Like, there's so much FOMO, especially I think in this virtual world. There's so, like, is there a meeting happening? Is there something going on that I'm not a part of? Because I'm no longer in the office 24/7 hearing all the, all the outside noise and the water cooler conversations. And so we work into this work. If I don't join it, am I going to miss out? And you know what? Maybe, but that's okay. It'll come back around. I promise. For sure.
There's always going to be another meeting.
There's always going to be another meeting. Always going to be another meeting. I literally was just on a Teams chat with one of my clients, and I'm like, hey, we're going to meet for half an hour. She's like, oh, but I'm already in this other workshop. Like, I'm like, okay, it's fine. Don't worry. This is just the beginning of the conversations. We will have another one. I promise you, it's not going to be the end of it. And that's, now she's like trying to decide which one. I'm like, no, just stay where you are, finish the workshop. We'll have another conversation the next day or two. It's totally fine.
Yeah, I think of the females on my team, and they absolutely need me to tell them, like, it's okay. Take your kid where you need to take your kid. I will catch you up later. You can miss this. So I think as leaders, we can help them really create those boundaries as well. And they just need to know it's okay.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting how that is, like, that confirmation can change everything, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes as leaders, like, to your point, we don't think about that. Like, it's okay. Just go do what you need to do. And I think that's maybe critical as well as for leaders to think about, like, okay, just give them the permission to not be there.
Yeah, we've talked about this quite a bit. We're really talking about prioritization and, kind of owning your time and
Your
yeah, and
boundary.
boundaries. So Betsy, what advice do you have for anybody who's trying to figure out what should the priority be? What really should matter to me, or what are the things that I just can't afford to miss, and what are the things that I need to push back on and set and put those boundaries up for? How should we be thinking about that, or what have you seen in your experience that works?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough, right? Because it's not like a nice black and white scenario. I think it's, if it's mission critical and you're probably the only one that can either give insight and have information, attend, be there. Can you, if not, can you delegate it? Can somebody else from your team? That's the other thing is allowing other folks into it, making your circle a little bit wider to say, okay, come on into the circle here. You attend this meeting for me. Here are the key points that I want to get away. So I think it's figuring out, one, is it mission critical? Is it a decision? Is it the last meeting? That we do have those sometimes, and we are making a decision, then attend, right? Because I want to be part of that final decision making if it's important enough that's going to impact me or my team. Or is there somebody critical that you've been wanting to connect with that's going to support you in a way that you need to? I mean, those would probably be the top three that I would say. But it's so hard because I think every organization is a little bit different. And, sometimes you just got to trust your gut too. Being like, hey, I probably shouldn't miss this one. I really should be in this one. I'm going to let that one go. And let the folks know that you're not going to, people who are triple booked and quadruple booked, doesn't ever happen. You can't do that. You can only be in one place at one time. So pick the one, look at the four, be like, hey, I can be here. So-and-so can be there. We're going to tell them we're sorry or reschedule, and we're going to move on. I do that with my calendar. If I'm triple booked or double booked, before that day, I make sure I only have one thing at one time because I know I can only be in one place at one time. And then I make sure, because it keeps my brain not from freaking out and being like, oh my gosh, I'm missing all this stuff, right? So really setting yourself up for success is critical as well.
Let's take that a step further. What advice do you have for those of us that, okay, we know we need to set those boundaries, but how do we do that, especially when, maybe our teams or our bosses, we haven't set those boundaries in the past. We answer those phone calls at 5:30 at night or 6:00 at night during dinner. How do we do that in a way that doesn't relay that, hey, maybe we're now disengaged or something's wrong?
I'm really like a fan of just saying it out loud. Like, guess what, guys? I am working way too much and I am burned out. So I'm going to start to show up a little bit differently. I'm no longer going to answer the calls at 5:30 because I need to sleep, right? At 6:00, unless the company has literally like caught on fire, I'm not going to answer it because again, it'll be there tomorrow. So I think being very intentional with who you are and why you're doing something is critical. And don't be afraid to say that, because here's the thing. There's there's work out there, right? I know we have all these layoffs and things like that, but you got to find a culture that's going to respect you and allow you to really say, hey, here are my boundaries. This is what I can give you. And I'm going to give you 8-10 hours most days, but there are some days that you're only going to get 4 because I've got other things going on, or I just need to take a break. I think we're in a time that we can say that. And, we're seeing it with this new generation coming into the workforce. They've got boundaries. They have a whole new way of working. Whereas, me, I entered the workforce in like the late 90s, totally different work style, totally different expectations. And so you've also got to be in the middle and figure out like, how do we make that work? Because you have a very multi-generational workforce. That's a whole nother podcast in itself.
That's the third one. We're still looking for the fourth.
I was just mentoring a woman. She's like, she has a team of 10. She's like, I've got folks that have been here for 30 years and folks that have been here for 6 months. And my 6 months want to be like promoted and doing all this stuff. And the ones for 30 years are like loving their work. And like, how do I support and lead these 10 people? Right. And it's a very complex, this is the messy middle that we're working in. Right. And it's very complex now, even more so, I think, because of the multi-generational workforce and expectation setting.
Yeah, it is hard. One of my organizations right now, I'm, really rethinking, okay, how can I create an environment? How can I create a successful business that also allows for these flexible schedules or these team members that only want to work 25, 30 hours a week? Like, how do I redesign this in a way that works for them and works for us? And it's challenging, but I completely agree that's what some of these individuals are wanting.
Yeah. And what I recommended to her was allow them to design it. Give them the guardrails, right? So again, everybody has a very different context, but we have to all be together and online during these core hours, right? So here's the guardrails, or we have to be in the office 2 days a week, right? You all figure out how to make that work amongst yourself as a team. So again, like these, like leaders also don't have to own everything. Give it back to your teams and let them come up with solutions and say, here's the guardrails that I want. Here's what success looks like. Now go figure it out and come back to me in a week. Then it's no longer yours to own. They might be super creative that you've never even thought of. And then like, okay, great. Let's experiment. Because you may be like, oh God, this will never work. Allow them to experiment and try it. And then come back in a month and retrospect. Is it working? Is it not working? That type of thing. You don't have to own everything either, I think, as a leader. And we sometimes as leaders try to, right? Always the how. How do we do this? Nope, let's just give it to the who and let them figure out the how.
It's really empowering as well.
Yeah, it is. Because I think it takes some of that pressure off of you to know everything. We don't have to know everything. That's like a whole nother thing. Like, honestly, I'm okay. I have no idea. What do you think? Like, that's I love David Marquet. I don't know if you guys have talked about him, but he talks about intentional leadership and like, giving the power back to the person to tell us like, what do you think? What do you think we should do here? I don't know. This isn't mine. So it's called Turn the Ship Around. It's a phenomenal book and he's got a great video around with it. So fantastic.
That's my favorite question. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, there's humility, right? And it shows transparency and it allows, you also want people to think. You want people to own the solution and not just be told what to do. And that's how, that's the other shift in leadership that we really need to start seeing. So for sure.
I agree. I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, right?
Now I do it all the time.
All the stuff on your plate and your brain could never shut off. You're like, oh gosh, what? Like I need to get rid of some of this stuff.
Like I guarantee you know that email better than I do. You probably know the answer better than I do. So I'm just gonna reflect that right back at you. I do it all the time, right? But there are many times where you can do that.
And I think, as HR leaders, those are tools that we can help support our leaders within the organization, right? Here's all these use these types of tools, don't own everything, kick it back to them, let them think about it. So, yeah.
So I want to circle back to one of the terms that you used was the messy middle. What is the messy middle?
Yeah. So it is that layer of leaders. They are probably not your first line leaders, right? And they're also not your C-suite, but it's all the folks, depending on how large your organization is, that sits in that messy middle. And if you think about it, they have the most probably complex job because they've got folks pushing up, folks pushing down, folks pushing on the side, right? And it's messy. They're having to navigate literally like it's not a box, but it could be a box. They're having to navigate, how do I actually get things done and support my leaders and partner across the organization? And I do a lot of work in the tech space. And so we used to call this the messy middle or the permafrost, because if that group of leaders is not aligned, it will make or break any part of your organization, any initiatives, any strategy. We've seen it happen all the time, right? So the best strategies can come from the C-suite. If those leaders aren't on the same page, it'll stop right there, right? Or if you've got grassroots efforts happening and it goes up, it can stop right there. So it's about how do we really support that group of leaders sitting in the middle to, one, support their leaders as well as support their organization and to kind of help make things happen within the organization. I work in very large, complex organizations and I see it all the time. We have these great ideas and just stop right in that middle layer. So that's the messy middle. That's the space that we work. It's the complexity. It is fun. It is challenging. And it's just a whole idea and concept that I think as HR leaders, we need to spend time figuring out how to continue to support them.
Yeah. Having been that person for a number of years in my career, it's like all these spinning plates, right? And you're just trying to, and to be honest, sometimes it's like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So you go and address whatever is noisiest. But if you focus too much on one thing, something else will fall on the other side. And it's definitely complex. And a good reminder now that I'm not in that seat that, that's, that's,
Well, I don't think
yeah, that's hard.
we don't put a lot as HR leaders. I don't think there's a lot of development programs for that messy middle, right? Because we spend a lot of time making sure our individual contributors are getting what they need. Our first time emerging leaders, like learning how to manage people and how to lead people. Our C-suite gets all kinds of good stuff and perks. But that messy middle, we don't spend enough energy on to say, how do we actually continue to help them grow professionally and personally and get them to pull them up the ladder? Because that's what's happening, right? And so that's really why we created the collaborative, is because, we know that group of female leaders needs that support, but we also saw a gap in what HR was offering or not offering per se. And so I think from a HR perspective, what development programs, how do you create a program that's really about that messy middle? And it's a lot of things that we just talked about, right? Empowerment and balance and focus and just really supporting them in how they continue to navigate all the complexities of an organization.
I'm curious, one of the things that you've, been focused on has been women getting stuck in that level, in that kind of that messy middle level and not ascending. And that's the statistics
Right.
prove that out. So what are some insights that you found as you've been doing your work there?
Yeah, I think it's about, one, it's how you show up, right? How do you show up as a leader? How do you show up as a female leader? There's not enough female leaders that are there to can hold the line, right? And also, talk with conviction, have the broad shoulders, balance the work-life thing. So I think it's about figuring out that and who you are and bring your authenticity. And people identify with that and they recognize it, right? And you start to get rewarded and continue to pull yourself up the ladder. It's also about networking and networking within your organization as well as outside, right? So have a mentor, have a coach, have a community of people to support you. And then allow your intentions to be known. I want to get to the C-suite. Say it, right? Believe it, dream it. Tell people, can you give me feedback? Can you give me support? What do you need me to do from that? So when you let people know what you're looking for, what you're wanting, it's going to it could potentially even come to fruition. And it may not be at that organization. Even if you let somebody know, you might actually move into a different one because they're like, oh, I'm going to just keep my eyes open. I'm going to tap you on the shoulder when I see something comes up. So those are the things that we're really working on in our program to support women from that perspective.
Absolutely. I think, from an HR perspective, the other thing to be really cautious of is the halo effect. And, we talk about that all the time, but if all your senior leaders are men,
yes,
they probably value the traits that got them to senior leadership, i.e. maybe they're really big extroverts. Maybe people just listen to them because they have a booming voice. Maybe they're really strongly opinionated and that works really well for them, but that might not necessarily be the skills or traits that you need to be successful in the future. And you might have a wonderful leader in the middle that has a different perspective, different traits, and different things that matter. And that's where I think HR comes in and pressure tests some of those assumptions of senior leaders. And you mentioned networking, all those things, those structures HR can impact, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I work with an organization. There's 2 women that sit at that senior level right now, very different personalities. And I love it because they're both successful and they both have their own style and their own way of showing up. And people gravitate to them differently, right? And it's the same thing with the entire C-suite. It's not just the women, it's the men. And I think when, creating that, to your point, that diversity of thought and leadership styles is what makes actually a really great team, high-performing team, because you may have a big voice in the room. You may have, the quiet ones are actually amazing because when they do talk, they usually have something really, really important to say. And it's very mindful. Right. So finding that balance is critical, especially within that space, even at the middle layer, for sure.
Yeah. I think HR can also add value by ensuring that these individuals and these leaders recognize what their personal strengths are and really utilize those in whatever setting that they are in.
Absolutely.
All right. So just wonderful conversation of we've got 3 or 4 more podcasts we need to record, but
Fantastic.
We're running towards the end of our time together. So we're going to switch gears. We're going to go into the Rebel HR Flash round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Question number 1. Where does HR need to rebel?
Okay. We'll just say the messy middle. like lean in, really support that demographic, that group. As well as I think the whole fulfillment piece of it, right? We talked about how did you create programs that help folks with their personal fulfillment and happiness so they can actually bring them into their entire selves to work. That would be like, please rebel in there. Forget like ping pong tables. Mama is great, but it's not going to make you a good employee. So that's that.
I'm still looking for that ball pit, but maybe
that's fun. That's fun.
How about like a wine bar?
Ooh,
that's Molly speed right there. Yeah.
There we go.
Give me a bourbon bar. I'm in.
We drink. You bring that up and be like, yeah, we're going to record drinking hour at noon, like liquid lunch.
We'll call it the hour of connection.
I love it.
You've got to rebrand it. By the way, we're not advocating drinking in the workplace if anybody's like upset about that, but whatever,
I might
judgment.
be.
Molly might be.
Like my most successful meetings are when I've had a little bit to drink, like to say what I'm thinking. Like, I'm just going to put this word out there.
That is where the authentic self can become a little bit risky. Exactly. You might be okay at 2, but once you hit 3, 4, 5, then authenticity might be a risk.
Kyle, that's where you have to create boundaries.
Yeah, right? You only have 1 hour of drinking, as much as you can drink in an hour.
That's good. That's my favorite response to that question. All right, question number 2: who should we be listening to?
So I'm an Audible person. Like I don't read books anymore. Maybe I'm not. Maybe whatever. There are 2 people that I just love. Jen Sincero, You're a Badass. She's got a whole series of You're a Badass at Making Money. You're a Badass. You have badass habits. Like just funny, raw out there. Like I like people like that are very quirky, right? And have a voice. Because I'm an entrepreneur and I have my own company, Dan Sullivan has a phenomenal book called Who Not How. And I mentioned it in the podcast, but it's really about thinking about the who's that you need to do the work as opposed to the how. So don't own it. So even if you're not an entrepreneur, I still think that's a phenomenal audible to listen to, for sure.
Absolutely. All right. Last question. How can our listeners connect with you and learn more?
crossimpactcoaching.com is where we have all of our goodness about the collaborative and organizational design and all the work that we do there. Or you can link in with me at Betsy Kauffman, which is Kauffman.
We will have all that information in the show notes. So open up your podcast player, check it out. Really just some phenomenal work. And Betsy, sincerely appreciate you spending the last few minutes with us and helping us understand how we can help impact some of the work that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Super fun.
Thanks. All right. That does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.
Baby.